There have been few novels in history that have had more comic adaptations than Tarzan of the Apes. Heck, it may be the most adapted in comics as far as I know. It's got 7 adaptations, and this, I would say, is definitely one of the weirdest ones. This is Marvel Super Special number 29, Tarzan of the Apes. And so we're going to talk about why this is one of the weirdest ones at the end. And we're also going to list all 7 of those adaptations that I know about in comic book form. But first, let's take a look at this super special, starting with this absolutely gorgeous painted cover. This is just a brilliant image. This shows you everything you need to know about Tarzan from his childhood to his adulthood in one image. It is beautifully rendered, beautiful layout, beautiful storytelling. I love it to death. On the interior, we are treated to another beautiful image by the same artist, Charles Wren. This is the only comic that his work has ever appeared on, but this is such a brilliant image. It's so unique. I love it. It's, you know, little Tarzan riding Kala when he's a child, and it's just so wonderful. And even when we go on the back cover, we're treated to one last image from Charles Wren, and this is a wonderful rendition of, you know, an ape, and then, you know, Tarzan throughout his life, you know, from baby to adult. And you gotta love that 80s hairstyle he's rocking. I mean, it's just so wonderful. This adaptation was also reprinted in regular comic format for 2 issues, and both of them also contain covers by Charles Wren, and they are wonderful, super iconic. And I love this one with him looking into water. That's such a pivotal moment in the novel that you just never see on a cover. It's so brilliant. The only thing I don't like about these covers is the way the corner box covers up the logo, but other than that, these are just brilliant. So whether you're getting this as the super special or the 2-issue miniseries, the interiors are going to be the same as far as the story goes. And so this is not done by your usual Marvel suspects, but these folks are very creative and very talented. And so we've got Sharman Divino and Mark Evanier, who actually worked on the Garfield and Friends animated series in the 80s, which is brilliant. You can watch some of that on Tubi. Mark Evanier has written a whole bunch of stuff, including being the co-writer of Gru. And so, of course, he was the co-writer of Gru Tarzan, which I reviewed last year. The interior artist is Dan Spiegel, and Dan Spiegel has done a lot of licensed comics for different publishers. He was also the artist on Evanier's Crossfire for Eclipse Comics back in the 80s. But perhaps his most well-known or well-read work would have been Nestor's Adventures in Nintendo Power. This is the later strips after Howard and Nestor, and you gotta love this scene of him in the safari outfit with the Tasmanian devil. So looking at the art, this isn't my favorite rendering of Tarzan ever, but I do admire the fact that he's going for a more realistic muscle tone on Tarzan as opposed to the way of drawing him that looks like he's been to the gym and he's always got muscles popping out, you know, and stuff like that. It's well rendered. The backgrounds are great. The storytelling's great. The way he draws all the characters is fantastic. He also does a great job on the apes. I mean, this is Kala losing her baby, and you can just feel the emotion here, you know. It's well written and well paced and very faithful to the novel, and the visuals are big enough to make them easy to read visually, but, you know, there's enough panels in there to tell the story in the amount of space they have, and the dialogue is big enough that it's easy to read too. It's just a very pleasant reading experience. The coloring is nice and bright, and it really brings out the line work, but I feel like it may be a little too bright, and that's just kind of a byproduct of the color processing of the time. In my opinion, the color comes out a little more realistic on the newsprint version in the mini-series, but that's, you know, a subjective thing. The line work doesn't show up quite as much, but I feel like this looks a little more realistic color-wise. I think it's definitely worth getting both versions, not just for the way that they're printed differently, but also for these gorgeous covers. Now, it's not a perfect adaptation. Tarzan does spontaneously grow a loincloth earlier than he should in the story, but that's super, super common in Tarzan of the Apes adaptions. There's only so long that they can use shadows over his nether regions, and most adaptions tap out early because in the novel he doesn't get it until he's 18, and it's after Kala's death and all this. So a lot of adaptions put him in a loincloth earlier than he should be. And then it ends halfway through the novel. I mean, he hasn't even met Jane yet. It ends with him killing Kerchak. This is right after the death of Kala. That is unusual, but that's not what makes it one of the most unusual Tarzan of the Apes adaptions. So Marvel Comics' run of Tarzan comics actually ended in the late 70s. This was published in 1984. So as far as I can tell, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, this 40-some page adaptation of half of Tarzan of the Apes is the only Tarzan comics that were published in the 80s. And this was published in Marvel Super Special. And Marvel Super Special was a series of specials that adapted movies. If you had a big blockbuster, you were going to have an adaptation in Marvel Super Special. And they literally adapted everything from Blade Runner to Santa Claus the movie. You can't make this stuff up, kids. But this is not a movie adaptation. There was a movie that came out in 1984 of Tarzan. It was called Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan. And you'll see that the word Greystoke is on the cover, but this doesn't have a darn thing to do with the movie. This is an adaptation of the novel. A completely different version, doesn't look anything like Christopher Lambert, doesn't look anything like anything in the movie. So in my review of Greystoke the movie, I went over the story of how it began as a script that was half completed by Robert Townsend that the Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated was very enthusiastic about. It was very faithful to the novel. Unfortunately, Robert Townsend could not complete that script and didn't direct the movie as planned, and so other people finished the movie and it became something else completely different. And by the end of the movie, it was a completely alien thing that didn't resemble Tarzan at all and had become this kind of artsy, tragic drama that was more Oscar bait than franchise starter. I said during my Greystoke review, I felt that this comic seemed to be a rebuttal to the Greystoke movie. However, I have since discovered it's far more than that. The paintings by Charles Wren were actually used in a plethora of Tarzan toys that were released around 1984, including these figures, and you can see on the back of the figures that it was a small line that only had figures of Tarzan and Kala. It was also used on a Tarzan board game, a Tarzan storybook, and a ColecoVision game that came out at the time. Why was this? It could again be a rebuttal. It could be actually a mutual agreement. Maybe they were like, you do your artsy movie and we'll just market a different version of Tarzan. Maybe they just didn't want to pay the studio for the rights to use the movie in the merchandise. I don't know. And so what this comic appears to be is the media for this Tarzan merchandise. This is the way that the kids will know what the story is for the toys and the board game and all that. Obviously not as effective as it actually tied directly into the movie. I actually was completely unaware of this. I would have been, I think, about 5 or 6 years old in 1984. I would have been a good target demographic for this. I was completely unaware of any of this. I didn't become aware of Tarzan until I was a teenager in the 90s with the big push behind Tarzan the Epic Adventures, the toy line and the show, and the Dark Horse comics. And that's a shame. I think, I would have really ate up Tarzan if I'd been exposed to the real character at an earlier age. All right, so let's talk about where this wonderful little oddity fits into the history of Tarzan of the Apes adaptions in comics. Hal Foster drew an adaptation of Tarzan of the Apes in the newspaper strips that started in 1929, and you can actually read this for free. Just look it up and it'll be on the EBR Zine website. The amazing Russ Manning drew an adaptation for it for Gold Key Comics. It's only one issue, and you can actually get it in this little trade paperback that Dark Horse published it, has adaptions of all 4 of the first novels in it. They're 1 issue apiece, and I look forward to seeing if Russ Manning could pull that off. Joe Kubert did an adaptation of Tarzan the Apes for DC Comics. This is how their Tarzan series began, and this is the Treasury edition of it. It's also available in single issues if you want to pay a bit of money, and you can also read it for free with a Comixology Unlimited subscription. In 1972, Burne Hogarth did a full-color adaptation of Tarzan of the Apes. You can get the original version of this for like $10 without the dust cover, or you can get it between $30 and $200 with the dust cover, depending on the sanity of the seller on eBay. Dark Horse has also done a reprint of this, but that's in black and white. The online comic strips by Edgar Rice Burroughs.com have an absolutely epic adaptation currently going of Tarzan of the Apes, and it also includes Jungle Tales of Tarzan because that took place during that same time period in his life, and it is written by Roy Thomas, and it's pretty amazing. Lastly, in 2012, Dynamite put out an unauthorized version of Tarzan of the Apes in the first plot line of their Lord of the Jungle series, and I can't really necessarily recommend this for enjoyment of reading because this writer just really didn't like the novel, and it kind of showed in the way he adapted it. But it is very interesting to see what he did with that source material. And so that's it. That's all 7 adaptions of Tarzan the Apes in comic book form that I am aware of. If I've missed any, please let me know. In my opinion, you can't have too many adaptions of Burroughs novels. I just always enjoy reading them over and over again. I enjoy seeing all the different things that different artists bring to it and their different interpretations of the characters. And I think this is a worthy but odd addition to that great tradition. By the way, if you like that Charles Wren artwork as much as I do, you can absolutely get that on a t-shirt on Amazon from the Edgar Rice Burroughs store. It is absolutely gorgeous and highly recommended. So that's it. I do a lot of other videos on Edgar Rice Burroughs comics and Tarzan toys and movies and all that stuff. So like and subscribe for more videos, and until next time, see ya.